Our final presenter today is Andrew Clifford, and I'll just mention that Andrew Clifford saw the potential benefits in the new non-fiat currency system could bring to the world and has strived to use his knowledge to help Bitcoin succeed. His background is mainframe systems, and he started information technology work in the early 1980s, developing accounting applications. Andrew is now the president of Bitcoin Unlimited, which he describes as a refreshing return to Bitcoin's original principles: main chain scaling, real decentralization, zero confirmations, user-friendly functions, trust in market forces, and democratic decisions. Today, Andrew presents Emergent Consensus.
Thank you, OnChain Scaling, for inviting me to make a presentation. I'm Andrew Clifford, and my background is in IT, where I spent many years writing and managing trading systems for too big to fail banks as a consultant. I left that behind in 2010 to write a book, a non-fiction historical work, and happily this was completed not long before I read about Bitcoin, where I've been distracted since, about 4 years now. All along, I've been inspired by its potential to reforge the world's financial system for the better. My talk today covers emergent consensus and market forces. However, these are really two phenomena from the same fundamental of nature, which is emergence. I assumed for a long time that the biggest challenges Bitcoin faces are external, from governments and mainstream finance. However, I now think internal challenges are more pressing. Bitcoin Unlimited exists to meet those challenges as a new and a holistic approach is urgently required. Most Bitcoin users assume that cryptocurrency is the future of money, which is why the CoinMarketCap website has important information. It provides a single place to keep a finger on the pulse of this revolution in finance by giving an overview of the cryptocurrency landscape. Particularly, what I've been tracking since 2013 is the percentage that they call BTC Dominance. If crypto is the future of money, then isn't this the most important number in world finance? Isn't this more important than the oil or gold prices because it measures what will shape the remainder of the 21st century? The market gives an 80% probability of success to Bitcoin having that role. If we assume that crypto replaces fiat sometime in the coming decades, then we need to know any others in the ascendancy. It does not matter whether a new crypto comes from the decentralized community or a government agency. To succeed, it needs an exchange rate, a market price, therefore it will affect this percentage. When Bitcoin was launched, it was 100% of the crypto world. That percentage hovered in the 90s for a few years, but it's languishing near 80% today. Today, Bitcoin is suffering from the ill effects of central planning. Development is out of touch with the majority of user requirements, and worse, new users are not wanted unless they have a high pain threshold to transaction fees. The only new Bitcoin users are those who push out old users who have a low pain threshold. In recent months, the network effect has stalled, and there's a clear choice forward for the Bitcoiners: support free marketeers or support central planners. So what's wrong with central planning? The father of Austrian economics, Ludwig von Mises, explains it well. Where there is no free market, there is no pricing mechanism. Without a pricing mechanism, there is no economic calculation. Here are two grocery stores in 1990, one in Vilnius, Lithuania, the other in Houston, Texas. Ex-President Yeltsin of Russia and his wife are suitably impressed by the variety and quantity of free market products. Central planning replaces free market decision-making with the decisions made by a committee of experts. Production and supply chains can only work effectively in the presence of a free market balancing demand with supply, giving accurate feedback to producers. Central planners do their best to succeed, but the Mises calculation problem is beyond any of them. The curse of central planning is that every single generation believes that they can succeed at it, even though all their predecessors have failed. We are seeing the same in Bitcoin today, just as we have seen with central bankers. So what is this free market system that keeps the Houston shops well stocked? Corporate capitalism harnesses the free market rather than fights it. Abundant evidence exists in 120 years of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. This index was created by Charles Dow and Edward Jones in 1896 with just 12 constituents chosen to capture the breadth of the US manufacturing economy. Here are snapshots at 30-year intervals. Red, orange, yellow, green, and blue mark the first appearance of each company in the snapshots. We can see how the top 12 are turned over due to competition and technological advances. Government intervention can be good or bad. Standard Oil and American Tobacco were broken up in 1911 for antitrust reasons, whereas General Electric, the only survivor in the top 12 today, was bailed out. The Bitcoin mining landscape shows a similar pattern. Here are the top 10 miners ranked by hash rate in annual snapshots taken in late July. You can see that Slush is the only major survivor. Kano is an early miner, but only this year makes an appearance in the top 10 snapshot. Bitcoin miner turnover is about 20 times faster than Dow Jones top 12 companies. Note that mining pools are good guys as they enable small individual hashes to compete with large solo miners. After nearly 8 years, Satoshi's plan for mining is clearly a success. So while natural selection in competing companies is a key feature of the capitalist model, something else is even more important. Efficient price discovery. This is a daily chart of the Bitcoin USD FX rate, commonly known as the BTC price, for the 2 months until mid-September 2016. Only the entirety of the market, all consumers and producers and their intermediaries and supply chains, have the detailed knowledge about their own individual circumstances, costs, and cash flows. These feed into a diffuse and collective assessment of value for any product or service at any time. Prices are forward-looking as buyers and sellers factor future expectations into present value with a decaying influence out to a time horizon. Moving averages have the illusion of prediction but are backward-looking using historical information. The efficient market hypothesis posits that all information is in the market. Despite getting a hard time, this hypothesis is broadly correct, and algorithmic trading only makes profits at the margins. Cryptocurrency is notably superior to fiat as money because exchange rate variation is much less for crypto than crypto fiat. The free market price of any good is an emergent phenomenon. Emergence is everywhere in nature, from crystals and snowflakes to the spiraling shapes of galaxies, macroscopic properties of liquids to weather patterns, anthills, and living organisms. The graphic here by the anthropologist Richard Seale is an abstraction of emergence in human cultures. All aspects of culture, language, standards, markets, cities, politics, etc., is emergent from the interaction of individuals or collectives of individuals. Emergence begins at A with discrete entities such as molecules, insects, humans, or even Bitcoin nodes. At B, there is interaction. A construct emerges in C, which transcends the entities. It could be a vortex, beehive, market price, or even a block size limit. Finally, in D, there is top-down causation shaping the behavioral characteristics of the individual entities. Causation takes varied forms like natural selection or adaptive information control. Emergence drives self-organization, and it can be hierarchical with many layers such as a multicellular biology. Reductionism fails at the first base because not even all the layers are known. Ishihara slides are used to test color blindness. They have pattern emergence but are too simple for top-down causality. The consciousness you experience in your head right now is at the other end of the scale, hugely complex, emerging from the low-level interaction of billions of neurons. Top-down causality is obvious considering the power of conscious action to perform activities, thereby modifying memory and personality stored in the neurons. Weak and strong are subjective terms used to classify emergent phenomena, depending upon whether it can be modeled in a computer or not. Bird flocking is a classic example of emergence, and everyone has seen formations in the sky like the V shape of geese or swirling clouds of starlings. The key point here is that high-level order can emerge from individuals following a few simple rules, despite having no understanding beyond their immediate peers. Here, 1, be attracted to birds of the same type, avoid collisions with neighbours, travel in the same direction, and observe 6 or 7 neighbours for reaction alerts. Emergent consensus on the best block size limit for the Bitcoin network will occur when full node software also follows some simple rules. It doesn't matter if variables are different, just that the general rules are the same. Nakamoto consensus requires all nodes to track the chain tip with the most proof of work. Additionally, BUIP 001 implemented in BU brings fork tolerance by enabling the full node software to reconverge to the best chain after a user-defined delay. In the example here, the orange block is mined larger than the excessive block size for many nodes. A miner quickly produces a smaller block at the next height. A BU node with a lower EB will put the excessive block on probation by not processing or forwarding it. In this node, the acceptance depth is 3. Only when the excessive block is buried under 3 blocks less than EB size will all 4 blocks, including the excessive block, be accepted. Here, 3 blocks are mined on the excessive block and the network continues on the chain, including the excessive block. Once the acceptance depth is reached for a specific node, it then fully participates in the network. At all times, there'll be a subset of nodes which are non-participating. If the economic footprint of these nodes is large enough, then miners will need to moderate their block sizes downwards to prevent a negative impact on the BTC market value. Generally, the non-participating population evolves. Here, the excessive block attracts one further block, but this fork was overtaken by another without the excessive block. Usually, the situation is only likely if the excessive block was record size, larger than any seen so far by the network. Record blocks might only occur once a week on average. Welcome to Bitcoin full node poetry. BU node owners can advertise their settings to improve network transparency. This keen big blocker is set EB20, but AD1 is much better than 72. Sybil nodes may advertise higher or false limits, but emergence only arises from nodes which fully participate in the network and have separate economic footprints within the ecosystem. Emergent consensus does not have to move slowly. In fact, it will change in a punctuated manner due to node owners choosing values at shelling points. The BU default settings already proving to be a new shelling point. The Bitcoin Unlimited node settings are seen here on sites such as bitnodes21.co. The current 1 MB limit is a very strong shelling point where all participants have coalesced. This is damaging on many levels, including that individuals cannot express the capacity of their own node and have this taken into consideration by the network as a whole. So the process of overcoming the 1 MB requires a one-off coordination between miners and the non-mining network. The miners will observe the majority of full nodes advertising EB and AD values, and we'll have to consider whether a population of them advertising values in a Sybil or inconsistent manner. They will have to observe the published values in mined blocks and assess when about 75% in that region and coordinate an increase, and the EB and AD and MG values can be modified to move to a state where emergent consensus prevails. So what does an emergent limit look like? This graphic shows the main attributes of centrally planned block limits compared with an emergent one. In each case, the emergence proves superior and optimal for the network. An emergent limit cannot be known at any time, just approximated. It is forward-looking as it relies on full owners' future expectations. It is also influenced by non-mining nodes as they reflect the wider ecosystem capacity. I mentioned at the start how Bitcoin's network effect has been arrested, and this is a failure of central planning. A limit imposed by software developers has created a situation of chronic undercapacity. Peter Risen made this chart last year, which neatly illustrates the Bitcoin block space market. Suppliers of space are miners, and demand is from users making transactions. Balance is to be found at Q star, where miners won't include further transactions as the fees are lower than their costs. Central planning reduces block space supply, causing a deadweight loss where miners are not receiving fee revenue and fee-paying users are turned away. Decentralization of the Bitcoin network is at high risk from undercapacity because volumes can't grow. The number of users is stalled, hence a lack of investment in new nodes. Users priced away from the blockchain will not run nodes which support it. High fees are now being paid by users for a limited service, but this is temporary until the market adjusts. The market adjusts by using supply substitution. In this case, the deadweight loss is made up for by altcoin usage. A large system has inertia in usage, so this process does not take place instantly. Bitcoin has been in a state of chronic undercapacity since mid-2016, and each day that passes sees the global cryptocurrency marketplace slowly adjust. Likely by mid-2017, the adjustment process will be fully complete. This will mean that the current high fee levels will fall back to levels seen before the undercapacity occurred, fee levels seen in 2015. Worse, Bitcoin's overall market share will have fallen further, and the same inertia which prevented an early supply substitution will also prevent any switch back to Bitcoin. Even if the limit gets removed, permanent damage is done. So central planning is a failure yet again. What free market options are there? The obvious free market solution is that miners allocate an optimum amount of block space supply as a function of the commercial competition they have with each other. We have seen how the mining market is efficient, so this is a good solution, far better than central planning. Examples are a universal miner algorithm such as BIP100 or the BitPay adaptive, which is a block size limit multiple of the recent median. Another option is no limit for blocks. This makes Q star optimum for miners and users, but miners are not the only nodes on the network. In fact, they are in the minority compared to non-miners. The cost of node option or CONOP is not equal between mining and non-mining nodes. Assuming non-mining nodes are weaker than miners, then some non-miners are pushed off the network by overcapacity. So here, decentralization is at some risk from overcapacity. An even better solution is emergent consensus for block space supply by using software such as BIP01, which permits top-down causality by adaptive information control to regulate the prevailing block size limit for all participating nodes. Qmax becomes the effective limit, and it is optimum for the non-mining network. Decentralization is at low risk from undercapacity. Like a market price, an emergent consensus block limit reflects all node owners' current capacity plus future expectations. The pesky altcoins are back again because demand exists which is not mineable. There will be some altcoins with less decentralization, lower costs to handle the rump end of transaction flow. But why should they even get that? There's one more change needed for the most optimal solution. Node services payment channels are the final piece of the puzzle for the Bitcoin network to self-optimize capacity and node counts. By strengthening the non-mining network, the emergent block size limit will be large enough such that Q star is accommodated. Q star is optimum for the whole network. Decentralization is at no risk from capacity issues. And all these slides assume that user volume will grow because Bitcoin transactions pay fees, and spam is easily defined as transactions which are below P star at Q star, i.e. insufficient fee. If emergent consensus is so good, why don't we have it today? Why doesn't it emerge? This hairball is schematic of the Bitcoin network. Some types of emergence already exist from it. The network effect of a growing user base and a growing market price are cultural phenomena emerging from a functioning and reliable network. What is not emergent is protocol behavior at a high level, such as the prevailing block limit. The Bitcoin network is a perfect substrate for high-order emergence and top-down feedback. It's a major advantage to make use of it. Emergence fails when the required properties are absent or suppressed in most entities. There are 4 components to the competitive landscape: on and off-chain scaling for Bitcoin and its best altcoin competitors. As volumes increase, then Bitcoin's inability to compete on-chain becomes an ever larger handicap. Most of the off-chain scaling work is being done by Bitcoin core development, so they are opening up the competitive landscape for off-chain solutions, which is largely closed to the altcoins today. Bitcoin's future is clouded by centrally planned economics. Altcoins will support block limit increases, Lightning Network, and sidechains. The altcoin set is a very powerful adversary because it benefits from natural selection. From the point of view of Bitcoin, it's irrelevant which altcoin prevails over its rivals. So why do we care more about Bitcoin's future? Equitable distribution. Bitcoins are spread into more hands more evenly than alternative cryptos such as Litecoin and Ethereum. This is the importance of the whole ledger itself, as global distribution takes time and can only happen sustainably through market processes. Early investors steadily cash out gains while new users come on board. This leads to a virtuous result. More users drives a higher unit value for the currency. If Bitcoin is to be the currency for 1 billion users, then we want to see the blue and red lines go as low as possible. To conclude, the most successful cryptocurrency will harness emergence and market forces both on-chain and off-chain in the most optimal manner. Questions are welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, we invite anyone who has questions to send them in on the Q&A.
Right, Amari Sachet asks, do you think the market is able to price the power of proof of work? It seems that it isn't dependent on the number of transactions and could go to 0. Right, okay. Do we think the market is able to price the proof of work? It seems that it isn't dependent on the number of transactions and could go to 0. I think that the value of Bitcoin is highly dependent on the strength of the power, the proof of work, the actual hashing power that is behind the coin. That there isn't a close correlation, certainly looking at short time scales, but I think that the high requirement for proof of work is a major support under the high Bitcoin price right at the moment. That certainly if the number of transactions was to remain at a low level and users were to go elsewhere because of the growth in cryptocurrency continues, that we will find the market price falling for the coin, and then the hash power will leave, so the actual power and the market price will slowly drop together if we cannot scale. That's my opinion. Second question, anonymous viewer is asking, what prevents a runaway block size with BU if there's a malicious mining contingent? Will other miners chase the longest chain even though they fear they won't be able to validate the larger block? Well, Nakamoto consensus is that 51% of the miners have to be honest. That is the premise behind Bitcoin. And this is the age-old 51% attack that people have worried about now for 8 years. If we cannot trust more than half the mining power, Bitcoin is broken anyway. If more than half the miners are mining a runaway chain tip, then we're under a 51% attack. And yes, the BU nodes will track that chain tip, but presumably it will exceed the EB of many nodes, so many of them will be lagging it. But it is an attack that could happen today. We could find a rogue miner taking more than 50% of the hashing power and performing actions which damage the network. So that this isn't really a new risk. Another viewer is asking, is emergence something that can be applied to more things than only the block size? And yes, emergence could be applied to more things than only the block size. It could be applied to something such as the block time instead of 10 minutes. That could vary depending on the decision of the network as a whole, and there could be a parameter that defaults to 10 minutes, and if the majority of the network starts to decide that it should be a shorter time, then the network may move that way. So there are other protocol things that could be put into emergence. However, the most important right now is the block size limit. Is the only one that really needs to be emergent at the current time. And with that one as an emergent property, the network should be able to grow 20 or 100 times larger. That is really the only one that needs to be moved at the present time. David Walk is asking, which percentage of blocks need to signal in favor of Bitcoin Unlimited before it activates? That is up to the miners. We were handing control to the miners. So at the moment, SegWit's got 25%. If Bitcoin Unlimited were to get 75%, then the miners may decide that that's sufficient, but they will be looking at the non-mining nodes to see whether they have followed. And if the non-mining nodes have largely followed, and that is above 50% for BU, then that is a majority decision, and that is Nakamoto consensus. Again, more than 50% is all that is required for Bitcoin to make a transition to a new state. So up to 75% and around that region should be sufficient for the miners to decide, looking at the full node network as well, that it's in support of their decision to make a larger block. In practice, what we would do is probably announce a flag day a month or two ahead of time to allow people to make changes and upgrade, and we'll give the core users a patch so that they can put emergent consensus into their nodes, so that the core nodes don't need to change back to BU. They could just use an emergent consensus patch and give people time to upgrade, hopefully before a block larger than 1.10 megabytes is mined. Another viewer is asking, is emergent something that can be applied to more things than only the block size? I had that before, and I'm just going to mark that as done. Tim Potter's asking, what are the miners asking for to support them through the transition from a 1 megabyte to an emergent limit? What do they need to run Bitcoin Unlimited? This goes back to the first question about our Bitcoin Unlimited trip to China. I'm going to answer both those just at the end with a summary about our trip to China and the situation with the block limit there. Free Trader's asking, a free trader asks, would you hazard a prediction about the landscape of the protocol development teams, how they will evolve, assuming Bitcoin's adoption can be brought onto a healthy track again? Right. Our vision is to have many development teams in the future. We want to see Core, BU, Classic, BTCD, XT produce and maintain their own versions that no particular implementation has more than 51% of the hashing power or 50% of the nodes, so that protocol changes require coordination between many teams, and that is our view of the landscape in the future. Getting over this WOMBI MB limit may need a majority of BU nodes for a temporary period, but we would hope to move to a multiple implementation landscape after that. Right, just going back to the situation today about BU's trip to China and the mining support. The miners have always supported on-chain scaling. That hasn't changed. They're very puzzled and dismayed that the 1 MB is being left. They are a little bit removed from the effects of the transaction fees, which are harming ordinary users. They're looking at the high market price, and it's kind of anesthetizing them to the problem. We're just still communicating to them about the situation. We're urging them to make a decision. It is extremely important that we scale on-chain as soon as possible. The network effect has been arrested for 6 months. This is just a disaster. A lot of the ecosystem companies are starting to move into altcoins, and we discovered that in China, a lot of the firms there have got big footprints in Ethereum and the Litecoin, and they're looking very hard at these other altcoins. If Bitcoin doesn't scale, it will become the MySpace of cryptocurrency. And the on-chain scaling is the only way that it will scale in the short term. We need to do this. And if Bitcoin doesn't survive the next 5 years, there's no point worrying about what the fee market's going to look like in 50 years' time. Another question from David Walt: could SegWit be included as part of Bitcoin Unlimited? This could well be included as part of Bitcoin Unlimited, and this is a decision of the members. We will certainly look at it as soon as this hard fork is done and we've got the on-chain scaling. There are some benefits with SegWit that, I won't go into them now, but it's not ruled out that it could be taken as is or with some variations. So getting rid of the witness discount, which is another central planning mess. So it may well need some changes, but that will be looked at after the on-chain scaling block size limit problem is resolved and we have emergent consensus for the block limit.
Thank you so much for your presentation today.
Yeah, and thank you for organizing it too.
You're very welcome.